I married the man of my dreams. A wealthy and charming heir. But beneath the surface of our perfect life, I discovered a dark secret. To protect our luxurious lifestyle, I turned a blind eye. However, the truth behind his shortcomings was far more shocking than I could have imagined. 1. Honey. Are you ready yet? Or should I go have some fun first? My husband's impatient tone made my heart sink. Before I could react, I heard the sound of the door closing. I looked at myself, carefully dressed up, and helplessly put down my eyebrow pencil. If I didn't say anything, who would believe this was our first day of honeymoon with Ricardo? My name is Alicia. I graduated from university and successfully got an offer from my dream company. Before my internship ended, I was fiercely pursued by the company's young master. At that time, who didn't envy me. Some even said sorely that I got this far because of my looks. But I worked hard to get where I am today. And I could see that Ricardo's eyes were filled with genuine affection for me. That kind of cherishing gaze, filled with me, made me unable to resist. Within half a year, I married this beloved man. But the night of our wedding night gave me a heavy blow. Ricardo was over 1.8 meters tall, with a handsome appearance. A perfect tall, rich and handsome guy. Before marriage, he gave me the feeling of being very gentlemanly. But his occasional actions would also make my heart flutter. But who doesn't want a harmonious sex life with their husband after marriage? I did too. Before marriage, I even specially searched for a lot of video resources, just to be more intimate with my husband. But my husband made me feel absurd that night. Not to mention any experience. My husband's behavior even had a kind of wimpish meaning. I felt humiliated at that time. Was my figure so bad? I couldn't even get my husband's liking. But the woman in the mirror was clearly charming. Everyone knew I was the goddess of the campus. I tried to find an excuse for my husband, remembering the smell of alcohol on him. Maybe he was drunk or too tired. But in the first week of our marriage, my intimate contact with my husband was only that night. Fortunately, my mother-in-law was very satisfied with me, seeing my husband busy with work all day and urging us to go on our honeymoon. During this period, she also taught me a lot of tricks to control my husband. But unfortunately, I messed it up on the first day. I even doubted that he didn't like me at all. But this thought only existed for a moment before I threw it out of my mind. Apart from sex life, his goodness to me was all real. Maybe he was too happy today and wanted to go out and play first. I mustered up my courage again and continued to get dressed. My husband likes swimming. But I don't. If I let my husband teach me and have intimate interactions underwater, I looked forward to coming to the swimming pool. And sure enough, I received a lot of surprised glances, which made me more shy and more motivated. With this outfit, I don't believe my husband won't be moved. But I walked around and couldn't find my husband. Before I could contact my husband, he called first. I picked up the phone with a bit of coquettishness and my heart sank when I heard the content. What a bummer. He actually arranged a swimming coach for me, and he was going to get a massage to relax. I immediately prepared to go back. What's the point of swimming without my husband? But as soon as I turned around, I heard a hearty greeting. Hello! Are you Miss Alicia? This sentence made me react for a long time. When I turned around, I found that this was actually a black-skinned sports student. He was at least a head taller than me, not to mention the strong muscles that his black vest couldn't cover. Paired with those white teeth, he was a perfect little wolf dog. The next second, the man suddenly extended his palm, then showed a white tooth, and smiled at me to introduce himself. This familiar tone, coupled with his appearance, made me want to laugh a little. But I also understood the meaning of his words. He was the swimming coach my husband found for me, too. Although I didn't mind the guy's athletic build, I didn't have the energy to swim. And the fact that he was a male instructor made me feel a bit awkward. While I wouldn't say I'm overly conservative, I do value the distinction between men and women. Having a strange man teach me to swim was something I never considered. Especially now that I'm married, my husband's arrangement made me very unhappy, and my refusal was quite harsh. However, after saying it, I felt a bit regretful. It was a problem between my husband and me, and there was no need to make an employee feel uncomfortable. Before I could change my mind, he enthusiastically said it was okay and that I could watch his lesson if I had time, as he had other students. His sincere expression made me unable to refuse. In a daze, I followed him to a quiet corner, where a woman with a hot body and a red bikini greeted me warmly. But she was even more enthusiastic towards the swimming instructor. I watched them do stretches and learn how to breathe underwater out of boredom. It was all so boring. But since I had agreed, I decided to watch for 2 minutes before leaving. But as I was scrolling through my phone, a seductive hum made me jump. I looked up and saw that it was the female student stretching, so I didn't pay much attention. But then, her voice gave me a strange tingling sensation. She kept panting and asking the instructor to go easy. I looked up and saw a visually striking scene. While there was nothing overtly inappropriate about their behavior, the stark contrast between their dark and light skin was very striking. I blushed as I listened to her moan, but the instructor showed no expression, looking at the woman's flushed face and lustful eyes. If I hadn't been there watching, I would have thought something was wrong. Perhaps my slightly intense gaze was a bit too much. Because she turned her gaze to me, rolled her tongue between her lips, and provocatively looked at me, motioning for me to follow her gaze. Following her gaze, I couldn't help but see the instructor's lower body, and it was quite impressive. I quickly looked away, but the image made me think of inappropriate videos, and my mind went blank. I heard that athletes not only have good bodies but also more stamina. I blushed angrily. The more I didn't want to remember, the more I could recall that image, and the look of the female student's blushing face. I was even a little curious. Just stretching and she looked like that. Could it really be that comfortable? Lost in thought, I suddenly heard a scream. They had actually gone into the water. And looking at the female student, who looked a little embarrassed but was clinging tightly to him, I guessed she had choked on water. I looked at the instructor's strong muscles, and he effortlessly carried her up. When I looked at the female student, she said she was scared, but I thought she looked more like she was enjoying herself. 3. I'd watched the entire session without realizing it. The coach seemed like a perfect gentleman. But that woman, her bold actions and words really opened my eyes. After finishing her session and chatting with us, the coach left. I grabbed my phone and turned to leave. "Aren't you going to give it a try?" she asked. I looked at her, puzzled. She rolled her eyes, telling me not to pretend. As women, she could see the tension in my eyes. Her words struck a chord, but the stranger's tone made me feel ashamed. But what she said next shocked me. Apparently, this coach was famous around here for being quite the player. But not many women actually hooked up with him because they couldn't handle his stamina. I was surprised by the explicitness of it all, and she looked equally surprised at my dumbfounded expression. "Aren't you here for that?" She said her husband was a wimp and that she'd heard about this coach and planned a romantic date with him. And from what she knew, everyone who came to him for lessons had the same goal, a casual fling. Although I'd just met the male coach, I couldn't see any hint of that from our brief interactions. It reminded me of the awkward feeling I had when we first met. So she had come prepared? Did he think I had the same idea? The thought made my face turn pale. I was both angry and relieved. Angry that she'd misunderstood me and at my husband's casual behavior. Relieved that I'd been feeling down and hadn't followed him into the water. Otherwise, the coach would have thought I was interested too. Fuming, I went back to my room, only to run into my husband in the hallway. He was drunk and had his arms around another woman. And then he kissed her right in front of me. Without thinking, I slapped him. "Ricardo, have you lost your mind?" The slap didn't wake him up. Instead, It scared the other woman and she let go of him. My husband fell to the ground. And she ran off looking disheveled. I looked at my husband, sleeping soundly on the floor, and felt like kicking him. That night, my husband snored loudly, and I lay awake thinking about that strong, toothy man. The next morning, my husband woke up with a sore face and complained. For the first time, I felt angry at him. I told him what he had done last night, but he asked me what the problem was. I didn't do anything with her, and I was drunk anyway. What's the big deal about a kiss? Seeing how unapologetic he was, I almost slapped him again, but I bit my tongue. What about that male coach? If you can't teach me, can't you help me find someone who can? My husband looked confused. Are you being sexist? Can't a man teach you? Are you that precious? His questions made me furious. I took a deep breath and told him of course, and that I would start taking lessons right away. I told him to come watch if he had time, just so he wouldn't regret it. I went to my room and changed into a bikini. As I passed my husband, he glanced at me without expression and said, "Boring." I knew my husband was a rich kid, but I always thought he was faithful. Today's events had opened my eyes. I took my husband to the same corner as the night before and greeted the coach warmly. The coach looked at my husband and raised an eyebrow, looking surprisingly cooperative. My husband sat where I had been the day before, scrolling on his phone, while the coach massaged me just like he had the other woman. I was just trying to make my husband jealous. But as soon as the coach touched me, I almost cried out. His technique was so professional, and the stretching made me want to moan. It felt so good that I couldn't help myself. But as he moved to different parts of my body, I tensed up and felt a strange sense of suffocation. I realized that I looked just like the other woman. Several times, I wanted to push him away, especially when I saw my husband playing on his phone without a care in the world. I felt so ashamed. Fortunately, the stretching ended quickly, and the loss of touch left me feeling empty. But that emptiness was quickly replaced by the underwater lesson. At first, the coach didn't do anything out of line, and I started to doubt what the other woman had said. But then, underwater, he seemed to change. Suddenly, he pulled me under, and I almost drowned. I clung to the only thing I could, the coach. But he didn't help me at all. I struggled, and when I finally surfaced, I saw him smirking. He had done it on purpose. Drowning makes anyone cling to anything nearby. I was furious. But before I could say anything, he told me to look at the shore. My husband was gone. His voice echoed in my ear, like a slimy snake. I never thought you'd be so bold. I thought he'd catch us. But now that he's gone, we can have some fun. He told me he had noticed my desire and that my reaction during the massage had turned him on. He wanted to. I interrupted him. Wait. I just wanted to make my husband jealous. Now that he's gone, there's no point. He frowned and his tone was strange. Really? I thought you'd already realized who his true love is. What do you mean by that? On my way back to the hotel, I kept thinking about what he had said. When I opened the door to my room, I was speechless. My husband was embracing another man. The sight made my heart race, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I blinked rapidly, trying to make sure I was seeing things correctly. But the fact was, their actions were undeniably inappropriate. I was completely taken aback. But the two men seemed unusually calm. So calm that I almost thought I was imagining things. But that possibility was quickly fading away. I entered the room and closed the door. When I looked at them again, they had separated. My husband was sitting on the couch, giving me a sheepish smile. "Honey, why are you back so soon?" His guilty look was a shock that felt like the world was ending. "Sister-in-law. Don't be scared. There's a reason why I was doing such a strange thing with him." The handsome man in front of me was my husband's friend. I remembered him as the best man at our wedding. His name was Paleo. With a glimmer of hope, I asked what he meant. He pulled me into another room, wanting to avoid my husband. My husband just rubbed his nose, looking guilty, but the chat history on Paleo's phone shocked me even more. The strange things they had just done were actually to treat my husband's illness. My husband had felt that he was impotent and had sought medical advice. Sister-in-law. I really didn't want to involve you in this, but my brother asked for my help, so I came. Thankfully, the tests showed that Ricardo is fine. Paleo sounded relieved. This explanation was absurd, but the chat history forced me to believe it. And when I thought about my husband's image, he didn't seem like a gay man. But it turned out that my husband had discovered his problem on our wedding night. That was why he had been avoiding me and treating his illness in secret, afraid that I would look at him differently. But why? I didn't know how to express myself. This realization filled me with panic. Paleo hesitated, clearly knowing something. I urged him to tell me the truth. Sister-in-law. Do you remember when we first met and they mistook you for someone else? Paleo's words brought back a memory of the first time my husband introduced me to his friends. They had all thought I was his ex-wife because we looked so alike. My husband had been upset about that. And I didn't want to be seen as a replacement. So I didn't want to talk about it. But today, Paleo told me that we really did look alike, and that my husband might have married me because of my resemblance to his ex-wife. I couldn't believe it. How could that be? He clearly loved me. The way he pursued me before marriage. The way he looked at me. Was it all an act? I didn't want to believe it. But when I looked at Paleo, his eyes seemed to see through me, making me instinctively avoid his gaze. But then Paleo smiled strangely. What does it matter if you were a replacement? Aren't you happy being married to him? Can you easily give up your luxurious life? His 3 questions interrupted my self-pity and made me feel like my heart had been ripped open. But then he changed his tone and told me that he wanted to help me. And that was why he had avoided my husband. 5. He said he was just trying to help his friend. He suggested that I could try to imitate my husband's ex-wife, copying her tone and behavior. And maybe my husband would be interested. I bit my lip and remained silent. He spoke again. Actually, it's okay if you don't. After all, you're not the only one who looks like her. Ricardo will always find a way to treat himself. It was almost like he was saying I would be dumped by my husband. But I had just married him. And I was just starting to enjoy the luxurious life. It would be a lie to say that I didn't enjoy it. So I agreed. But could imitation really make my husband interested? Did he only love me because of my similar appearance? Paleo left with a suggestive look in his eyes, urging me to do my best. When my husband saw us come out, he pulled me aside and seemed hesitant to speak. Finally, he just sighed. He softly apologized. And it was a small comfort to know that he had a reason for being distant from me all this time. But I didn't know what to say for a while. I had thought I had married well. Except that my husband had a little problem. But now it seemed that my understanding was completely wrong. Seeing me silent, my husband just held my hand and kept apologizing. Actually, I know you're angry, but I couldn't help it. When I saw you being so intimate with that coach, I was about to explode. But at that moment, I actually felt something. So I quickly asked the doctor. I didn't listen carefully to what my husband said after that. But the phrase "I actually felt something" gave me a new idea. My husband actually had this kind of fetish. I told Paleo about it. And he had the same surprised expression. Later, he asked if I could try it according to this idea. I didn't understand. But after hearing his method, I felt like I was turning beet red. Paleo and I took my husband to a massage parlor to help my husband regain his feelings. Paleo found a male masseuse who was blind. My husband and Paleo watched me get a massage from behind a curtain. I endured the masseuse's touch. patiently waiting for my husband to get angry or suddenly appear. Paleo told me to hold on, and I believed him. But as I waited, I lost track of time, and the masseuse's hands became more and more restless, which made me feel a little panicked. But thinking about my husband, just then, I heard my husband's voice from behind the curtain. A strange sound. I listened carefully for a while, and my expression became even more strange. When I rushed over and opened the curtain, my expression was indescribable. Looking at their intertwined figures, I was filled with anger, but I also felt a strange sense of understanding, as if I had already guessed what they were doing. Looking at their panicked expressions, insults were not enough to express my anger. 6. I threw everything I could find around me, screaming and cursing. What the hell was he? Why would he hide something like that? Why get married and then pull this on me? He'd played me for a fool in a whole drama series. I yelled so loud that people outside started asking questions. But I didn't care. I just wanted everyone to know what a bastard Ricardo was. When Paleo ducked to the side, I charged at him and slapped him several times. Before he could react, I turned to Ricardo and tears streamed down my face. I don't know what sin I've committed to be deceived into marriage. I was so wronged that I didn't know what to say. But I kept hitting him. Ricardo didn't resist at all, which gradually calmed my anger. But what should I do next? Get a divorce? Alicia, please forgive me this once. I know I was wrong. It's all Paleo's fault. He seduced me. He's destroying our marriage. His words were so shameless that I slapped him again. My husband covered his face and asked me to listen to his explanation. Paleo remained silent during this time. My husband's explanation was mixed with lies. But some things I believed were true. He had been normal before. And he had been normal when he was pursuing me. After all, he did have a child with his previous wife. Thinking about this, my expression softened slightly. But how could a straight man suddenly become gay? Was it just because of male curiosity? Alicia, please give me another chance. Or you can cheat on me too. I don't mind if you find someone else. My husband's nonsense made me angry again. But his attitude of admitting his mistake made me feel a little better. When I asked him to compensate me for some of my losses, he agreed without hesitation and even said that as long as we didn't get divorced, he would do whatever I asked. His words made me think, and I fell silent. The man in front of me was already tainted, and I no longer had the courage to love him. But as long as we didn't get divorced and I could keep this from my parents, he would listen to me in the future. I could even have an open marriage. After all, he already had a child. I just needed to eat, drink, and be merry every day. I left them and decided to go back and think about it. That night, I made him draw up a contract, and we both signed it. As long as he kept this a secret, I would enjoy endless wealth in the future. After signing the contract, I told them to get lost, and they really didn't appear in front of me anymore. And I found a new hobby. The swimming coach's teaching method was pretty good, and I was quite satisfied with my figure. And now that I was paying him a lot, he only focused on me. I could tease him at will, and he could only look at me resentfully. This was much more fun than a simple affair. Of course, he had tried to make a move, suggesting that we be together. Unfortunately, after what happened with my husband, I had absolutely no interest in that. Unknowingly, a month passed. One day, the coach, Scar, suddenly told me about an interesting island that I would definitely not regret visiting. I had heard of this island before, as many ships had been heading there recently. I was intrigued by what he said. Mysterious, and an experience you would never regret. That's what they said about the island. I thought it would just be a relaxing trip, but I saw 2 unexpected people on the ship, and it almost led to my downfall. 7. Because of Scar's persuasion, I simply chartered an entire ship. Although chartering a ship did cost a lot of money, It didn't matter to me since money was just a number for me now. But as I relaxed on the deck and enjoyed the view, I saw two people I hadn't seen in a long time. So, sister-in-law, are you surprised to see me? Paleo and Ricardo were holding hands. When I heard Paleo say that, I almost vomited up my dinner. But just as I was about to scold them, seeing their sweet and carefree look, I suddenly felt something was wrong. How did you get on? This is my ship. Your ship? You're having a great time spending my money. I could hear the sarcasm in Ricardo's tone, which made me a little annoyed. What right do you have to say anything about the disgusting things you've done? I don't want to see either of your disgusting faces again. Get out of here. Are you not afraid of me calling my parents? I thought they would be a little concerned. But instead, they looked at each other and laughed wildly. Alicia, it's time for you to regret it. In a flash, they approached me. Seeing their hostile looks, I subconsciously called out the swimming coach Scar's name. Unfortunately, Ricardo grabbed my collar and slapped me. The slap made my ears ring, and I fell to the ground, unable to react for a long time. But they obviously didn't plan to let me go. Ricardo kicked me into a corner and then started punching and kicking me. Although I instinctively wanted to resist, I realized that I couldn't beat this strong man. The more I resisted, the harder the punches landed, and my screams and pleas gradually faded. You bitch! You dare to hit me? You spent so much of my money and you dare to threaten me? I've finally waited for this day. Let's see how I'm going to kill you. He cursed as he hit me, his face contorted in a terrifying way. Was this Ricardo's true face? I suddenly felt a sweet taste in my throat. He left me with a breath, but Paleo came over, looking like a devil, and I couldn't back away. He smiled and patted my cheek, his tone even a little regretful. Such a beautiful face. It's a pity to beat it up like this. That's what he said. But the strength of his grip didn't lessen at all. What exactly do you want? Are you going to kill me? The pain made my tears uncontrollable, but I still refused to give in. But Paleo showed me exactly what it meant to be merciless. When Scar and the others were called out, I couldn't even feel resentment at being betrayed. Scar was still grinning, smiling as usual. But what he said was really disgusting. He said he liked me, but I refused to be with him. I had money but was too stingy, so I might as well follow Ricardo, my boss, because Ricardo and Paleo had promised me money and more. What do you mean by that? His words made my hair stand on end. Ricardo had someone set up a camera and pulled me to the middle. Alicia, be sensible and don't resist. I just want this video. But if you don't listen, I won't just stop there. Ricardo! I'm your wife. I screamed in terror. I didn't expect him to be so disgusting. But Paleo just laughed. You're not his only wife. His previous wife suffered much worse. Hearing this, my heart felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 needles. They said that they had been looking forward to this day since the day they got married. They originally wanted me to have an affair with Scar, but I never took the initiative. So this happened. Ricardo asked everyone to take turns, and each person would get a lot of tips. I saw a group of people walking towards me, and the fear in my heart made me beg. But they only complained that I was yelling too loudly. They complained that the deck was windy and wanted to drag me into the cabin. As I was being dragged, I grabbed Ricardo's leg. But before I could say anything, he kicked me and I had to let go. My desperate look made them laugh. Soon, my screams filled the air, and I heard Ricardo impatiently ordering someone to cover my mouth. 8. When I was dragged out again, I found we had arrived on a small island. Ricardo walked away with a look of disgust at my appearance, while Paleo walked forward with a sense of satisfaction and told me that the price for stealing his man was death. I was tied up and had no chance of escape. I asked him why. full of resentment. Clearly, it was Ricardo who had pursued me. And he had a wife and child before. Why was he gay? And why did he treat me like this with Paleo? Do you really dare to kill me? My parents won't let you go. The police will continue to investigate. I can divorce as long as you let me live. I'm willing to leave everything behind. I told him I would agree to anything as long as he didn't harm me. But Paleo just looked regretful. He told me that I had no reason to live. Ricardo's parents don't care about anything. They just want to maintain their reputation. So it doesn't matter who Ricardo's wife is. But I was rejected by his parents just because I'm a man. Why is that fair? He looked at me crazily and asked me why. We are true love. Why should they break us up and find you bitches like you? Just because you can give birth. But I can make Ricardo kill you all for me. We are true love. And you are just a stumbling block. I endured his torture while listening to his hysterical rage. He told me that as long as Ricardo's wives continued to disappear and have accidents, one day Ricardo would no longer get married. And there would be no third person between them. He kept saying that their love was so pure. But why did their purity require my life? After his outburst, he smiled and asked me to accept death peacefully. Because after I died, he would release the video of me being humiliated and let those women know what it would cost to accept Ricardo's love. When Ricardo ordered people to drag me to a pit and bury me alive, I was in a daze. Perhaps seeing how pitiful I was, he suddenly said sorry to me. Actually, you won't be lonely if you die here. Because you have someone to accompany you. You have fulfilled our love. And I will always thank you. Ricardo. Do you really love Paleo? Do you really love him so much that you're willing to die for him? I suddenly looked at him curiously. Ricardo nodded sincerely and said yes. I laughed. I don't believe you. Why don't you try dying for him instead? He looked at me strangely, thinking I was crazy. But the next second someone carried me away. Ricardo was surrounded by several people and beaten. He roared and struggled, asking them if they wanted to rebel. Seeing him being beaten alone, I pushed Paleo in too. The lovers couldn't be separated. They screamed and asked me why, accusing me of playing tricks. I forgot the insults and screams. I picked up a shovel and silently dug a hole nearby. If Ricardo wasn't lying, then my sister was lying here. Thinking of her appearance, my vision blurred. After a few minutes, I finally dug up a corpse. Although my tears blurred my vision, I could see that it was clearly her. I couldn't control myself anymore and turned to look at the two badly beaten beasts. Meeting my gaze, Paleo hid behind Ricardo in fear. And Ricardo even told me to come at him. I granted his wish. I threw Paleo aside and had people bury Ricardo alive. As layer after layer of soil was poured down, he shouted and screamed, saying that I would pay for this. Paleo also cursed me, calling me a vicious woman with a twisted mind. But I was just doing to them what they had done to me. Wasn't I? I raised the shovel and told Paleo to shut up. I looked at them curiously. I originally wanted you both to die. But don't you claim that your love is stronger than gold? Don't you say you're willing to die for your lover? Ricardo, I'm giving you this chance. From a distance, I noticed the look in his eyes, like a devil from hell. Later, Ricardo was not buried alive because he regretted it. He said he realized that he didn't love Paleo that much. He begged me for forgiveness and said he would confess to the police and admit his mistakes. Paleo's face turned pale as a ghost when he heard this. I nodded and said yes. But one of them had to die. I don't know how it started, but they started fighting and insulting each other. Although the scene was a little chaotic, the insults they hurled at each other were really pleasant to my ears. Is this your great love? You said you were willing to kill your wife for your love? Do you think you've sacrificed a lot? Finally, they couldn't fight anymore. Ricardo's face was unrecognizable, and he asked me what I wanted to do. He said he had already been punished for his crimes. I didn't think so. You're guilty of 3 or even 4 lives. How can you think that's easy to atone for? Just for deceiving my sister and killing her. You deserve to be cut into 1,000 pieces. Hearing me list their crimes, their faces finally showed some fear. 9. On the boat. They wanted to see me humiliated. But in fact, I was just held in Scar's arms for comfort, while the others were helping me treat my wounds. Of course, I didn't let them treat the wounds that were exposed outside my clothes. They were bodyguards I had prepared long ago, and they were acting according to my plan all along. Isn't this evidence enough now? I didn't notice Scar's worried gaze. My mind kept thinking about Paleo's words. Ricardo's previous wife was worse than me? How was that possible? His previous wife was my sister. After being married for almost a year, the messages she sent me told me she was just suppressing it. I asked her to get a divorce, and she said Ricardo wouldn't agree. I said I would go find her, and she just asked me to wait. She said she had a handle on Ricardo. But then, I heard about her disappearance. To find my missing sister, I seriously searched for clues. But I accidentally discovered that several of Ricardo's consecutive wives had either died accidentally or disappeared without a trace. But how could this be? How could there be such a coincidence? With a questioning mind, I went to the company and saw a deeply affectionate Ricardo, knowing that his beloved wife had disappeared not long ago. How could he have moved on so quickly? I knew there must be something fishy, and this realization made me decide to play along. Fortunately, my persistence paid off. I didn't bury them alive. I knew that was challenging the law and my own moral boundaries. But my sister, at such a bright age, why should she be buried underground forever? I wanted him to confess his sins, and I wanted them to kill each other. I just wanted them to see for themselves what their so-called great love was really like. After torturing them, I brought them back home and called the police. Behind these 2 arrogant outlaws, there must be an even more arrogant family. I don't believe my father-in-law and mother-in-law didn't know about their daughters-in-law who kept disappearing, and didn't understand how disgusting these 2 people were. But they didn't care, because they thought they could control everything with their power and status. When the police took them away, they were not even flustered and asked for legal counsel. But the police slapped the evidence in their faces. When they were sentenced to death, I didn't know whether to be happy or not. John told me I had waited for the belated truth, and he said congratulations. But is this really worth congratulating? The belated justice I cannot accept, because my sister buried underground never spoke, and I am not qualified to accept it for her.